Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your applause. As I said this morning, you might want to hold your applause till afterwards, you know? But can you all hear me okay? All right, excellent. So like Carla said, I am a botanist, so I study and look at plants. Last year I started my own company, the Midwest Biological Survey, which its mission is to understand and to survey the biodiversity of the Midwest. So although most of my work happens in Indiana, I do a lot outside of Indiana throughout the Midwest. Mostly what I do is surveys, botanical surveys specifically, but all kinds of ecological surveys in trainings, because I love what I do and I want to share that knowledge with as many people as I can. I grew up, my dad was a preacher. He was a traveling preacher, and he raised me to be a preacher. And although I didn't make it through Bible school, here I am with you preaching about plants. So I'm sure if he's looking down from somewhere, I'm sure he'd be quite happy with where I am. So anyway, we're here not to hear about me, but we're here to hear about plants and the wild, wicked, and wonderful wildflowers. I got 4 W's in that one, in Indiana. So some of the things I'm going to talk about, just kind of set the stage. It's going to be a little bit of a natural history trip. So I'm going to introduce the amount of plants we have compared to other states, get you set up with that. And then I'm going to showcase some of the unique plants that you may or may not have heard of that occur throughout the state. There's a little bit of a northern bias because that's where I'm from, and I love our northern plants. Although your southern plants are pretty cool. I've been playing with those the last couple days. But when it's all said and done, hopefully what you get out of this is new stories and curiosities that you can leave here and share with your neighbors, with your friends, and those around you. What I'm really looking for is a bunch of little evangelists to go around and preach the good news of these plants and the incredible stories that are tied within them. All right, are we ready? All right, let's go. So Indiana has, and this is a approximate from BONAP, these numbers are, depends on what species, what complex is, so this is generalization, mind you. In Indiana, we have approximately 2,922 taxa of plants. In comparison, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio have got us beat. That's okay. Illinois has us beat in a lot. Native plants, over 2,000 in Ohio. Every one of our surrounding states have us beat. Okay, that's okay though. They can have it. It's cool. We're kind of in this weird spot where all of these states' plants sneak into ours. One thing we have that many of these states, Michigan excluded, don't have, this is one reason I wanted to talk about these briefly, is something called Atlantic Coastal Plain disjuncts. This is one of the only slides I'm going to show with a lot of words on it. Okay, so this isn't going to be one of those talks where we have to read the whole time, all right? So an Atlantic Coastal Plain disjunct, this is information taken out of Tony Reznicek's wonderful 1994 paper on the Atlantic Coastal Plain disjuncts of Indiana and Michigan. And what they are is they're plants that are known in the Atlantic Coastal Plain. And I'm going to show you a couple of them. So they occur like in Florida, all the way up, sometimes South Carolina, North Carolina, along the coastal plain, and then they occur in northwest Indiana usually, in southwest Michigan. That's it. It's like, what? What are you doing here? You know, and then this is where they occur: the southeastern Georgian Bay region of Ontario, the sand plains near Lake Michigan and southwest Michigan and northern Indiana, and then the lake. So Wisconsin does have a few, I guess, too. We'll give Wisconsin that. And they're all areas where sand deposits, as the glaciers receded, this sand deposit, when it moved up here, it settled in these all more wet areas. And they found refuge in these spots, in these little niche habitats. So if you go up to the Jasper-Pulaski Wildlife Area, which is a really cool place, highly recommend going, checking it out to botanize, looking at birds. If you're a birder, it's cool too. The Indiana Dunes as well are a couple spots that you're going to find some of these Atlantic coastal plain disjuncts. There's about 62 species of Atlantic coastal plain disjuncts within this. One of them, and so before I introduce you to Atlantic coastal plain disjunct, one of the ones I want to introduce you to is a carnivorous plant. Because as many of you probably know, some plants have evolved the capability of eating animals, of using animals as a source of nutrients, which is crazy. And one thing I've learned as a botanist is plants will do anything to reproduce and survive. And some of their evolutionary mechanisms are so cool. And we're gonna tease some of those out today. But some of them are so cool, like it's just, you could spend weeks just hearing about it. If you hang out with me, that's all you would do is hear about it. So the first one I'm going to show you is this little Utricularia purpurea. One of the things I'm going to do too is I'm going to use the Latin words. Okay, I'm putting the common names up for you, but I'm using the Latin words, and I'm going to talk about what the Latin words mean to try to demystify it a little bit. Because this is the good Christian name for this plant. This is kind of the nickname we gave it because, well, we don't learn Latin. Botanical Latin is not really true Latin anyway. It's kind of this really, we take these Latin pieces and names and made up things and we shove it all together and we call it botanical Latin. Look how smart we are, you know? So utricularia comes from the word utriculata or utriculate, which is a bladder. It just means the bladder. And in purpurea, it's purple, okay? And why is this called Utricularia bladder? So this is an aquatic plant. This is its flowers in water, and this is its underwater stems. And what you see here is these little round circles, right? These are actually its modified leaves. And those little round circles have this little mouth on them. And it has this hair trigger, and I'll show you here in a second how this looks. It has this hair trigger. And if you're a little water flea and you're just swimming in the water and you hit that hair trigger, reverse osmosis happens, and it sucks it right up. And then it digests it and uses the nutrients to survive. This is pretty cool. This is its distribution. So you can see it's along the Atlantic coastal plain all the way up into Maine. I don't know what's happening in New York. And then you can see this gap here. And as the glaciers receded north, they all got kind of stuck up around Lake Michigan there. Yeah, you guys don't get this one. But you do get some other bladderworts too. And I think there's maybe a slide that kind of shows you. So you do get some yellow bladderworts. So it's kind of the same. I'm just showing you an Atlantic coastal plain disjunct. So this can be a little informal too. So if you do have a question, wait till the end. Don't interrupt. Kidding. So watch this. Isn't that cool? So I showed this. I did a presentation one time just on carnivorous plants. And afterwards, someone raised their hand and they're like, well, if, you said if a water flea hits that hair trigger, it's going to suck it up. Well, what happens if it's a little piece of algae or if it's a little protist or something that hits it? And I was like, I don't know. So I went home and there's a lot of good literature on this because a lot of people had that same question. And curiously, there's a whole ecosystem, and they're actually really bad at catching things like water fleas. And there's a whole ecosystem within these bladders, kind of like our stomach, and it all works to digest and to produce enzymes, and it's very specific to each species bladder, which is awesome. So we have these whole microbial specialized ecosystems that have evolved just with this plant to make sure that it can stay carnivorous. Oh, I didn't so before I talk about this, so we have a handful of different utricularias, the bladderworts, and around most of Indiana we have what's called the common bladderwort, and it has yellow flowers. Utricularia vulgaris means common. I think we've gotten better data that shows that ours may be separate from vulgaris and is macrorrhiza. But it doesn't matter to you. You can call it Utricularia vulgaris, and it's fine. But they all have that same mechanism. They all have the ability to just suck up life forms and digest them, which is pretty cool. Has anyone seen this plant before? Sarracenia purpurea, purple pitcher plant. This is another northern species. Sorry. You guys don't have really a lot of bogs down here. But this is a northern pitcher plant, Sarracenia purpurea. And what happens is insects, so there's hairs on that lip there. That's a modified leaf that's enclosed. And there's hairs that are downward facing. So if you're an insect, you're climbing in, you smell something, and you slip down into that pitcher, and there's liquid that just sits in there. And you get stuck, you can't get out, and then you die. And then the plant absorbs you, which is pretty gross. Now so this is the flower. The flower is really cool. This is the sepals, and then the petals fall off. It's nice. I could talk about how cool the stigmatic structure is, and how the anthers are structured it nicely in there, and really cool. But really what we care about is that this thing eats animals, okay? So we have, let's see if this works. So this is a southern species called Sarracenia alata. Yeah, it's really a cool species. One thing most of our pitcher plants in North America have, they're mostly southwestern or southeastern species. They have this hood. It's also called an operculum, but it's just a hood. That's the technical name for the hood. And one thing to note about ours is it doesn't have that hood. So what do you think that hood is for? What do you think the evolutionary reason that you would not have a hood, or you would have a hood? If ours grows up north, all the way up into Canada, and theirs grows in the warm southern
sun and
humidity, to keep the moisture in, to keep it from evaporating out, so it holds the moisture in. And here it doesn't need to. Also, there is enzymes in these pitchers. As soon as they start forming, there's enzymes that can break down the insects or the amphibians if they get stuck down there or whatever, to break them down and kill them. But in the Sarracenia purpurea, again, purpurea means purple. I'll tell you what this means in a second. In our northern purple pitcher plant, it doesn't have those enzymes. And if it does, it's only a few right when it starts forming. What it has is a whole community of organisms that live in these pitchers that break down whatever's in there, and their waste is in part what the plant eats. And so it's this whole relationship. There's actually a species of mosquito that only lays its eggs in this. Now, I know most of you are like, okay, so we should get rid of this plant. Now, this mosquito's okay. You're not going to get bit, unless you're in a bog somewhere, it's not going to get you probably. So there was actually some studies found in the Northeast, and I forgot where exactly, but they were finding small spotted salamanders stuck and dead in the pitchers. And the pitchers were actually dying too, because they're like, this is too much. We can't do this, you know? So this is its distribution. I don't know what's going on with this one here, but you can see it really likes the northern, the kind of northern, it goes up into Canada as well. I don't know what's along the North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina over there, but that's its distribution. I figured I'd show you that so you know it's not down by you. So this guy, Michael Sarrazin, this is where Sarracenia, the name, came from, is this guy's name. So he was Canadian, late 17th century, and he found this thing. And he hypothesized that this thing eats insects or animals. And let me tell you, the scientific community said, you're crazy. There is no way a plant eats an animal. There's just no way. And he's like, well, I think it does. So but because he collected it in Canada and he sent it to, probably ended up being Linnaeus, he got it named after him and the whole works. But his idea that it was carnivorous sparked one of the greatest botanists and influential botanists of the 19th century. You know that guy? Charles Darwin. A lot of people don't know that he was an incredible botanist. Because he was so meticulous and so interested in studying organisms, he spent many years studying orchids, studying carnivorous plants. He was very fascinated with the idea of carnivorous plants. And so he looked into this and he was like, yeah, it's carnivorous. He studied the sundews. The sundews have these landing pads. Have you seen these things before? They have these long hairs with these little sticky dewdrops on the end. And then they have short hairs in the middle. Okay? You're an insect, you land on it. And if you lick it, it actually is very sweet. I've done it. It was small, so my tongue didn't get stuck. But can you imagine, though, like you're walking, 1,000 years ago, and there's these don't exist. I'm making this up. And there's these giant sundews, and you're like, ooh, this is nice honey. And you reach down and grab it, and you're stuck. And what happens is those if you're an insect, you're eating that nectar, that sweet nectar, and those hairs, those trichomes, curl in. And now you're stuck already, and it curls in, and there's these needles in between with enzymes on it. And it just dissolves you. This is real life, folks. So anyway, I'm going to have a drink before I go to nicer things. All right. So that's your snapshot on a couple of the carnivorous plants that we have in Indiana. And many of you have seen this one, right? Erythema triphyllum, Jack in the Pulpit, or Jill in the Pulpit, or the pulpit. So I love talking about this one because this one would seem to have the potential to be carnivorous, but because it grows in such rich, lovely, delicious soil, it doesn't need to be. And I'll tell you what I mean here in a minute. So Erythema, here, I think I actually put this in. Yeah, so Eris equals arum, so it's in the arum family. So your peace lilies, your Easter lilies with that hood, that kind of spathe, it's called. So that's the same, this is a spathe, just kind of like that same structure. Hema is blood, hemoglobin, and that's when the botanist named this genus, he looked at some, I think it was South American species, and they have this really red lining in the veins that looks like blood, and so that's where the name came from. And then triphyllum just means, phylum is leaf, and tri means three. So three, because it's a leaf has trifoliate, so it has three leaflets on it. So as you can see here, so this is a female flower, and this is a male flower. So curiously, Erythema triphyllum, Erythema is every year it may produce a different sex. One year it can pop up and be a female. Next year it can pop up and be male. Next year it can just be a leaf. And I've read through so many scientific articles that think they figured it out, and then another one says, that didn't work for me, I think I got it here, and another one says, that didn't work for me, so we still yet don't know what causes that to happen. Females will have two leaves, so each one of these looks like the three leaves. I should have got a better picture here, but it looks like the three is actually one leaf that's just broken up into three leaflets. So the males will just have one, and the females will have two coming off. Females are usually a little bigger. You guys down here have a really cool, I dare call it, it's either a subspecies or a different species called Pusillum. It's a lot smaller. It's like this tall. The little spathe is this tall. It's it's got this waxy coating, and it looks a lot different than this triphyllum, but I think both of them occur down here. But what happens is on the males, you're an insect and you fly down into that spadix, that modified leaf with the hood, right? You've seen that? So you're an insect, you fly down, and the flowers are in the bottom of that hood. So you fly down to get to the nectar or whatever you're looking for, and you try to fly up, and you can't figure it out because I don't want to say insects are dumb, but they don't have a mammalian brain. Okay, so they start flying up, and the way it's structured, they're like, I don't know how to get out of here. So they're flying and they're flying, and then they get pollen all over themselves. And on the male plants, what do you see here? A little exit. There's a little hole. So they're like, okay, we're out of here. Let's go. And then they're flying. They're like, okay, we're good. We're good. They got pollen all over them. And then they're like, oh, we smell something. And by the way, the flowers, which I'll show you a picture of the flowers in a second, they're not very attractive. They kind of smell stinky. And so if you're kind of a fly or a gnat or a beetle, smells like something you want to check out. So they fly into the female, and they buzz around, and what do you note about the female? There's no exit. So if you look at female, this spadex, you can look and find dead insects on the bottom of it, because they're just like, sometimes you'll find holes chewed in the bottom because they're just like desperate to get out. And this plant doesn't care about your feelings. It just wants to reproduce, So it's just kind of interesting. And there's the flowers. See, they're tucked way down in the bottom. Nothing to write home about, but it works for what it's doing. So there's its berries, because, I don't know, I just put them on because it's there. Oh, I did put this on today. Just because this is a rust fungus, something in the Pyxiniaceae. So this is a fungus that occurs on Erythema and Peltandras, which is a close sister species. And the reason I put this is because I was at someone's house last night, not naming names, and they had an Erythema dracontium, the green dragon, which is a very closely related sister species. And it had the Euromyces on it. And what this is a rust fungus that is specific just to these. And the reason I showed you this is that a lot of things in the Pyxiniaceae are reliant on a specific, sometimes only one species or genus of plants. So if this plant didn't occur, this ugly, crazy fungus wouldn't occur either. And for how much we think it kind of is gross and deforms it a little bit and does its whole thing, they are still important organisms that have co-evolved and struggled to live with this organism. So I just wanted to point that out because it was fun. Oh, parasites is next. All right. Got to get a drink every time we get to a new thought. So a lot of you may know what this plant is. Who in here has seen this plant before? A few. Have you ever seen it this blue, though? Never. I was up in, and I'll tell you the story. Just keep this in your mind. I'm up in Michigan. I'm doing a survey. This is up near Cadillac, Michigan. And I'm walking, and I'm like, what is that? And it's blue. As you can see, it's blue. I don't need to tell you. And I've seen them pinkish and white, but never blue. And I'll talk about what it is in a second. But just get this in your mind. Think about it, and we'll come back to it, okay? Someone said, one of my teachers back in the day said, put a pin in it. I think that's the right context to what we're talking about. Okay, so this is Monotropa uniflora. Monotropa uniflora. Literally, monotropa means one turn. One turn. Uniflora means one flower. It's not scary, is it? You just got to remember how it's all put together, because that's what we do. We just take these pieces of words and we put them together and we say, look at our language. So it's also called ghost pipe, corpse flower. Oftentimes, I get messages like, what's this fungus? Because it kind of looks like a fungus, right? Because it doesn't photosynthesize, because it's a parasite. So what it does is our oak trees have this cool relationship with the fungal community, right? So what they say is they have this deal that they've brokered. They say, hey, we're going to give you all kinds of sugars and carbs, and you're going to give us some of the minerals we need and some of the nutrients we need, and we'll do a little bit of a switcheroo. So you take what you need, and I take what I need, and it's all good. And everyone's like, okay, this is cool, And it's this big network, this big connectivity that's going on. Well, this is actually in the blueberry family, mind you. shows up and it says, yeah, we can do that too. It starts hooking up and doing it. And over a very long period of time, it just doesn't give back anymore. And it just takes. And it doesn't even need to make a flower if it didn't need to reproduce, because it's getting all the nutrients it needs from both the yolk. And what it does is it comes down and it says, hey, I can give you something. And the fungus, the mycorrhiza, hooks up with it. And then it just takes. It just takes. And that's what keeps it surviving. Look, these are the leaves, actually. These little scale-like things are the leaves on it. It pops up and just does its thing. And then when after it matures, it lifts its fruit up and then lets its seed go. Now, this is the curious thing, and why I wanted to come back to this. So it parasitizes Lactarius mushrooms, which are the milk caps. You can see where the name comes from. Milk, lactare, yeah. So you break them and they got kind of this milky, and then the russulas. Those are the two genres. I used to say genre as a joke, and now I get stuck all the time, and so it's whatever. Now, curiously, up north, and I don't know if it's this far south, we have a Lactarius indigo, which is I should put a picture next time on this slide, which is a bright blue Lactarius, and it bleeds this dark blue, milky latex. One of the most beautiful mushrooms you've ever seen. So I got thinking, and this is my hypothesis. I have not proven this, and I probably never will, because I just don't have time. But that blue monotropa was taking from a Lactarius indigo and stealing some of that blue dye. You know, that's my thought. I've never seen it blue, and now it's blue. I don't know. So that's my thought on that. Okay, so then we have Hypopides monotropa, which is a sister species, kind of does the same thing. What's one of the things you note about this, beside the color? Lots of flowers. You see the lots of flowers? Yeah, lots of flowers. So monotropa uniflora, one flower. So this clearly has a lot more than one flower. These are all little flowers in it. And then these are the capsules all up and down. And the curious thing about this is that they parasitize tricholomas. So they trick the tricholoma mushrooms to hook up with them. Which, you know, whatever works for you. Oh, and they evolved. Does anyone know what this plant is? It's a Gaultheria procumbens, otherwise known as wintergreen. So where we get our wintergreen, you can actually chew the leaves on this and it tastes like wintergreen. But it actually evolved from that lineage. So early ancestors of the monotropas came from this little dude. And it's just over time, it's just like, hey, we're doing our thing now. We got this, you know. We all have that person in our family. We know who they are, you know. We know who the monotropas are in the family. You don't need to say it now, though. Jeez. Okay, so here's another one that's cool. Does anyone know or have heard of a cuscuta? So it's also called daughter.
Oh, yeah.
And this is when I have to say, don't call me daughter. No Pearl Jam fans? Okay. All right. All right, so this is... Oops. Oh, there we go. So this is a parasitic plant that has had some really cool studies done. So it has it's an annual, so it has these small seeds, and it grows up, and it literally grows toward its host plant. And if you move the host plant over here, it's like, oh, going over there. Oh, going over there. And so it has this, and I think they did a test where they put a glass jar over the plant, and it's like, where'd you go? Where'd you go? And they lift it up, oh, there you are. You know. Absolutely incredible. So what it does is, maybe I put these, oh, there it is. So it has this thing called a historia. Now, if anyone looks at mushrooms or studies mushrooms, that's kind of a mushroom word that's used often. And it's the part that attaches and absorbs to absorb nutrients. So what happens is The Historia is on the stem here. There's not much for a root at all. And what happens is it has these little nodules that lean onto the stem of the plant and absorbs through the plant wall until it hooks up with the vascular system and it starts stealing the resources, the food. Now the cool thing about this, and one reason I want to talk about this, is because I read a paper one time that blew my mind. It's something I never even thought about in my life. And hopefully if you haven't, you will now think about this. It's this thing called horizontal gene transfer. What is that? I'll tell you. So what happens is this plant parasitizes this other plant, okay? It's stealing its food, its resources, doing its thing. And this plant is like over hundreds, maybe thousands of years, it's evolving these defenses to try to beat the parasite. Well, what we found is the parasite actually gets, when it takes from it, it also takes part of its genetic makeup and it starts taking that and using it to one-up the host plant. So instead of transferring genes through sexual reproduction, it transfers them through theft. I didn't even know this was possible. And so it's instead of lateral gene transfer, it's horizontal gene transfer. And this is a thing that's happening. It's wicked. So this is one that is quite common, probably our most common daughter, Cuscuta granovii, and it has these little white flowers, these rounded corolla lobes, and then it entwines, and just all that stem under the flowers there have Historia that have just eating through that plant cell wall. So it's split from Ipomia. We have Ipomias all over southern Indiana. They're really cool. The morning glories, about 33 million years ago. And the daughters don't have really any evolutionary defense. So if there's like stuff happening, it's like, okay, we're just gonna lose, quickly produce seed, fall, and that's it. It's a very opportunistic species. It doesn't photosynthesize at all. It is 100% parasitic, and if it doesn't find its host plant quick, it's going to die because it's got such small seeds that it's got to find it quick and attach and start robbing from it. And then again, it probably evolved from root tissue. So a lot of our parasitic plants, the Historia is in the root system, and that's where. But this is in the stem or in the stems of the vine, and so it's quite unique in the way it's evolved and the way it's formed. It is. I think it's listed as. I think it's listed as a noxious weed because it's even though it's native, it's very troublesome sometimes in some areas because it just mats over everything and just takes over. But I actually have to look on that. All right. Whew. That's all the parasitic. We have so many cool parasitic plants. Ones that are so parasitic, they parasitize on each other, on themselves. They're like in the roots, they're like, oh, there's a root, and then it's like their own root, you know? So has anyone heard of marsh hemlock, Cicuta maculata? So this is a native hemlock species that we have. The Native Americans called it suicide root. It is maybe the most toxic plant that we have in North America. The old saying, I'm a botanist, I don't need to carry a gun. This plant, I didn't actually say that. You could cut. I'm done. I realize I got a camera on me. I got to watch what I say. But Cicuta maculata is in the carrot family, which is a lot of our really toxic plants, like poison hemlock. And any part of the plant is toxic, but the roots are the concentration of the most toxic parts of the plant. So if you ate a chunk of the root or just a bite, you could have permanent liver damage and die within days. It's quite incredible. One way to, and it's a nice native plant. It's quite common. One of the things that you can see these nice umbels of flowers. The inflorescence type is called an umbel. They're like an umbrella. It comes from that central spoke. These are umbellets. I just like saying umbellets. And one thing that one way you can tell this from other things in the carrot family is the veins on the leaflets run into the sinuses. So with the teeth, it runs up into the sinus of, not into the teeth of the leaf. Can you see that? Yeah. See how it comes up into the sinuses and not on the edge of the teeth there? So that's something that's more indicative of telling the cicudas apart. And then there's it from kind of a distance. I didn't put the distribution, but it occurs throughout the whole North America. Very, very common within the wetlands of North America. Whew. Are we doing okay? Are we staying with it? All right, I'm just giving you just a rapid, you know. I shouldn't even do, now I can't do any of that. I just talked about like using cicuda and salads, and now I'm so orchids, I know that you had Mike Kamoya come last year, which I'm sorry, I'm his follow-up. You can actually tell him that, and he'll be like, I'm sorry. No, I love Mike. But you know, he's an orchid specialist. And we have over 40 species of orchids in Indiana. About 20 of those occur up in the Indiana dunes, which is pretty cool. And now with the work of the lady tresses, kind of breaking up some of the complexes and understanding, we have way more than 40 species. So we're still trying to understand that. Orchids are fascinating because they are the most diverse species of plants in the world. Even though we only have 40 in Indiana, throughout the world, it is the most diverse species of plants. And they come in all shapes and sizes with some of the craziest mechanisms to have pollinators come and visit them. And this is one of them. And we've had such a weird fascination with orchids. And it might not, I don't know why. I think part of it is the word orchid's actually from the Latin word orchis, which means testicle. Yeah, sorry, Mom. And it's not because of the lady slippers. It's just because I know you were thinking it. I know you were thinking it. The underground corms, or the roots, when Linnaeus was looking, that had kind of this, because he's, I don't know, the Swedes are a goofy bunch, you know, had like, you can visualize it. It looked like that, okay? Enough. All right, so this species is restricted to the northern strip of Indiana, and it's disappearing fast. And a lot of it is because in Michigan it's still quite common. It's more of a acidophile, so it sticks around bogs mostly in Indiana, but when you start going up north, you get in the pine forests and in the bogs, and it's quite common. But one of the reasons I think it's disappearing is there's a bee, Bombus vagans, that pollinates this. And I have not seen Bombus vagans in Indiana. I've seen it in Michigan, and I'm thinking, and this is just anecdotal, that's one reason that we're losing it, is we're losing its pollinator. And because this thing does a terrible job of keeping its pollinators happy. So what is this pouch, beside anything else you're thinking, is what happens is you have this bombus, it's a bumblebee. You have this bumblebee fly in, and it's like, oh, this looks like good. I'm going to get some nectar. I'm going to get a reward. This is cool. And it goes down into this hole. And then it's like, okay, there's nothing here. There's no nectar here. There's nothing for me. There's no pollen, nothing I can use. And it starts trying to get out, and it realizes that it can't. It's in this maze, this crazy maze. And it's upset. It's going through that pouch and finally exits. So it picks up the pollen, and then it exits and takes off. Okay, now all upset because it didn't get anything. Well, a lot of the bees aren't stupid. And so they fly up and they're like, oh no, I've seen you before. I'm not doing it again. But once in a while you get someone, you know that guy. It's the same family member we were talking about before that flies by and looks down at the pouch and is like, maybe this one's got something, I'll try it. Goes back in. When it's climbing in, it spreads that pollen, gets down, and it's like, nope, gets out and goes away. And then it doesn't come back so they call them naive pollinators because they just don't know better yet, but then they learn pretty quick. But, and you think, well, that isn't a very good evolutionary idea. But the one thing about evolution is that it doesn't have to be good, it just has to be good enough. So I think of it like this. I think Richard Dawkins talks about this. So if you want your house to be 60 degrees, right, that's the ideal temperature for reproduction. Your furnace is going, and it's at 75, and it's going. You're like, no, I need to be 60. So the air conditioner turns on, and it's like, ooh, trying to cool it. And both of them are going, and once it hits that 60, it's like, oh, we're perfect. But both of them are running, trying to hold that. And it's like, all you have to do is shut one off and keep. It's not very efficient, but it doesn't matter because it's where it's supposed to be, and that's good enough. And so we see that. But then what happens when we get something like climate change, or we get something big that moves those goalposts? We could see species loss, we could see species extinctions, we can see a change in those mechanisms. Does that make sense? Okay. That's the reason I want to talk about this, not just because it's fun to make you all feel dirty. This is a cool aquatic plant. We're only a couple more in. If you're getting exhausted, we're almost done, I promise.
He's running out of beer.
Who invited this guy? You're not wrong. I'm done. You're a terrible crowd. I'm just kidding. Okay, so Brassinia shrebii, water shield. I had to put another aquatic in. I love aquatics, emergent aquatics. What I did my grad work on, they're often ignored when we do vegetation surveys, and they're some of the coolest and very important plants to the different ecosystems. Water shield is really cool in that, has anyone seen this plant before? So it has this, and the next slide it'll show some pictures of the leaves. It has these round leaves where the stem comes right up and hooks on the leaf. For those that want to hike, do you remember what that's called? Peltate? Peltate. Peltate, yes. So it's that. And it has this really cool glutinous like gel under the leaves that's hydrophobic. So it floats on the water and doesn't break down because it's got this cool gel. But what I want to talk quickly about is these flowers. So what happens is we have the male flower here, we have the female flower here, and then here's the male flower high and the female flower low. So when I read that, I thought they were dioecious or at least monoecious, which means that they have separate male and female flowers. But then I was reading that they don't have separate male and female flowers. They're on the same flower. I'm like, what are you talking about? So then I dove into this and found this really cool story. So what happens is this plant, day one, shoots up the male flowers. All the anthers are out and exposed, mostly wind pollinated, mostly. And day one, the pollen's ready. Some flies may take it, the wind takes it, and then it goes to sleep at night, goes underwater. Day two, it pops out of the water, and all the females are exposed, and the males have already fallen off. And that's what we see here. So all these males have fallen off, and the females pop up. And then the wind blows the pollen from the males on the other plants onto the female or flies or whatever, and it flops back down. Day three, it pops up. Female, less receptive, just kind of done, but like just in case. I'm here. I'm tired. We've all been there. And so the fruit looks like that. These are the leaves, and you can see where it's attached in the center. This is, sometimes you can see these whole colonies of it. And it's a really cool, neat plant. And then we have these shore flies, these notophilus. And although wind is the main pollinator on it, what I noticed is that there's some areas where the notophilus are everywhere, only on the water shield. And because that's what they do. they just love the water shields. So they can help to even though it's adapted for more wind pollination, they still are secondary, what we call secondary pollinators. But they rely on these as well for their survival. And so again, what I'm trying to show, even though these are ugly flies, that there is still this important connection. Like I could show you beautiful butterflies and really cool bumblebees, but you all see that. You all have your pollinator gardens or have read about them. What I want to introduce you to is kind of some of the misfits that aren't as pretty looking, but still need these things to survive, that are still tied and connected to those. All right, I think this is the last one. It's not as exciting, but it ties into that. So the Lysimachias are the loosestrifes. And we'll talk about where that name came from in a second. So we have many of them all throughout the state, different species. And thinking about when we do butterfly gardens, when we do pollinator gardens, or whatever fun word that you want to throw out there to get grant funding, we forget about things like this, that doesn't produce any nectar. What it produces is these fatty oils. And what do these fatty oils do? First I got to talk about the name. Forgot I had Lysimachus here. Forgot about this guy. So he is, King Lysimachus is where the name Lysimachia came from. Legend has it, believe it or not, the story is that Lysimachus there's a big raging bull coming. I mean, the face of Robert De Niro looking at him, right? Nobody's seen Raging Bull?
He looks like he's looking at a raging bull.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened was this bull came at him, and he grabs this loosestrife, and he waves it at the bull. And the bull just stops in its track. And it's thought to be the Lysimachia, and that's why they named it after him. And so, because this myth has held for so long, in the old days, when they had oxen, they would put when they farmed with oxen, they'd put loosestrife flowers and plants on the oxen to keep them more temperate, which is kind of fun. But anyway, let's go back to the fatty oils, because that's really what we're going to talk about. So this is a Micropsis. This is I got this from USGS website. Micropsis nuda, the Micropsis genus, relies on those oils for food and nest building. So they have a close coevolutionary relationship with the Lysimachia species. They'll actually even defend Lysimachia flowers from predators because that's one of their main life sources. So oftentimes when we think of our pollinator gardens, when we think about what we want to put in our yard, we have such a generalist view of what we want to see, as many big butterflies, as many bumblebees as we can on this. But these plants, a lot of these plants that are in these ecosystems that we're putting parking lots over are connected to things like this Micropsis bee. That if it doesn't have Lysimachia, it doesn't have the resources it needs to survive. And this is almost every plant has something tied to it. Just like we as humans are tied to every plant to this earth. Even though we can build cool caves that are temperature regulated, that have artificial light sources, this is amazing. Like, we are animals that did this. This is cool. But we also have to think and not be ignorant enough to miss the whole relationship that we have with the life that sustains us. Even though we can export the resources from us or import it from another place in our backyard, we still need those to survive. And for the future of our children, I would ask you all, this is my son Mateo, I would ask you all to think about the steps you take in life, the things you do in life, the choices you make, and try to be more nature conscious in what you do. And in that, is there any questions? Look at the timing of that. That was excellent. Anyone want to ask what's going on in this picture? Yeah, so I was, this is Jasper Pulaski, actually. And I was looking at some Atlantic coastal plain disjuncts with a buddy of mine, and I think he's maybe 5 in that picture. And I hear him yelling, Dad, Dad, where did Mateo go? And I walk over, I need some help. He's trying to cross the ditch and realizes that it doesn't go all the way across. And so, like a good dad, instead of helping him across, I first take a picture and then help him across. I'm like, what are you thinking? He's like, I thought I could get across. I couldn't. So anyway, it's just a great picture. And here's my contact information. I also have a YouTube channel, Botany and Beer. So the idea is that you can drink beer while you're learning botany. And it's just me literally sitting by a plant and talking about it. So if you want to know a little more nitty gritty, a little more about the plant, a little in depth about the plant, check out my Botany and Beer YouTube channel. Also, this is my company's Midwest Biological Survey. Check that out. I don't have a website yet just because I'm busy and I'd rather be out talking to y'all than making websites. Again, thank you. And I hope you get home before the storm gets you. So.